I was looking forward to this movie ever since I heard the basic premise. Riz Ahmed, playing a rock drummer who suddenly loses his hearing and has to come to terms with his future after that event, sounded extremely appealing to me, like a setting ripe for dramatic exploration. So when I saw that this film had released on Prime, I jumped in instantly without knowing much else. The first thing that stood out to me was that there was evident attention paid to the sound design and music. Everything we hear is crisp and detailed, and in the first few minutes it helps to clearly set up what we need to know about the protagonist, Ruben, what his priorities in life seem to be, and how he lives it. He loves his girlfriend, he channels all his energy through his drumming, and he basically lives for music, injecting it into so many aspects of his life. And it's believable, tangible, which makes it all the more disheartening and tragic when he starts going deaf, a situation that is shown to the viewer, again with the help of some very creative sound design. It's almost as if it seems to peel back layers to a guy that appears to have his life together, but on the inside is still fragile and covered in fresh wounds. It plays into one of the major themes of the film, loss, and how we take what we have for granted, be that senses, material possessions, or the people we care about. There's a clear connection and similarity to the works of Derek Cianfrance here, both in themes and tone. The plot is based off of an unfinished film of his, and Darius Marder, the director, wrote The Place Beyond the Pines, so one can understand how a similar type of melodrama to those films manifests itself here. But it's not overused in my opinion. It always seems to stick to a central, very simple yet real conflict, and it humanizes every character that appears in a scene, giving them particular qualities that make them feel real and that are a testament to how good screenwriting should work. So much of the characters is displayed through actions. For example, Ruben is shown to be loud even when he can't use his voice. He has trouble finding peace in silence. Even the smallest appearances seem to have a little something to add. Here's where the casting is to be praised. Ahmed does an absolutely wonderful job carrying the viewer through the film and making them empathize with him. Olivia Cooke is great as his partner with an equally troubled past, and Paul Raci absolutely shines as the man who takes him under his wing. But it's not just the more visible roles. A lot of the actual deaf people who are cast add a lot to the credibility of the film, and they do good work with the time they have on screen. As great as everything is, I do have some things to point out though. Sometimes it feels like the film introduces problems and solves them rather quickly, with montages for instance. And while I'm not against them as storytelling tools by any means, maybe there can be an over-reliance on them here, since it feels like they're used as a rather easy solution to the problem of how to showcase a very difficult transition in a character's life. Another point, given how most of the movie tends to strive towards realistic representation, some scenes stand out where there are some medical inaccuracies and procedures, as in doctors would strive to inform their patients of certain things a little bit more, and some scenes where deaf characters speak during instances where they don't really have the need to do so, and it feels as if it's done mostly for the audience. The final act also feels a bit different tonally to the rest of the film, which I suspect is intentional but feels slightly incohesive. Furthermore, there are some elements that aren't necessarily bad outright, but they did make me think and question the film at times. For instance, at a certain point in the movie, a character makes a decision that I'm still not totally sure the film takes a correct stance on, if there even is such a thing as a correct stance on this. While I don't feel like it romanticizes being deaf, it also feels a little unsupportive of people who choose to make that particular decision. But I'd like to stress, this is entirely subjective, and if anything, it makes me want to seek out the opinion of an actual deaf person to understand what they think on this particular subject, given that I do believe ideas on this would vary a lot depending on personal experience. It's hard to discuss without spoiling, but if you see the film, you'll understand. And even though it's an issue that I might not completely agree or disagree with, it's undeniable that the fact that the movie chooses to dive into these conversations is something commendable, because, for better or worse, sparking debate around these topics furthers our understanding of people who tend to be marginalized. At one point while watching this film, I accidentally muted my speakers, and for a good amount of time, I thought that the lack of sound had been an artistic choice. It was only because of the closed captions that I noticed something was off. That might seem like an unimportant remark, but I think it works in showing how close attention was paid to how this film would play for a hearing audience and a deaf one. A Apparently, it was also shown with closed captions in festivals, so I'd recommend enabling that option given that it seemed to be the filmmaker's choice when screening it, and it also adds an interesting layer of evaluation to everything that you're seeing. To sum it up, I feel like Sound of Metal is a pretty straightforward film that bravely confronts a very difficult reality, which is that of loss. It's terrifying in many ways, not just because of how scary the notion of losing one of your senses might be, which would be the more superficial way to read into this film, but mostly in how it relates that to the idea that we're all just living our life and sometimes shit happens, and you change or others change and there's no going back to the way things were before. It doesn't ultimately matter how loss comes into your life because the feeling is actually universal. In essence, Sound of Metal responds to that with the story of a man trying to roll with the punches yet struggling immensely along the way. Ruben's journey is hard and you can feel your heart tearing for him, but it's just another component of life. Some get hit harder than others, but we all lose something along the way, and what I ultimately gathered from this film is that at least we can take solace in the fact that, in a peculiar way, we're all connected through loss.